Hi everyone. This presentation will discuss about Module 5, Marketing Mix Variable. We are now going to discuss the promotion, part 1. And this is a set of learning objectives that we try to achieve with this module. Okay, so today we have discussed the marketing mix variables. We've discussed product, price, placement, and now we discuss the promotion. Okay, and if you look at this, there are a number of tools that we can use in promotional mix that includes advertising, product placement, public relations, and so on and so forth. Some scholars group them into five promotional tools: advertising, public relations, sales promotion, personal selling, and direct digital marketing. Right, and our prescribed textbook suggests describe them a bit further. Okay, when it comes to promotion, we actually discuss about the communication as the essence of promotion. The word promotion comes from the Latin word promovere, which is basically to move forward. So when we move forward a product or service to another party, we actually include the activities to convince the others, which essentially leads us to communicating to the others. Therefore, the term promotion has evolved in marketing communication. And if you look at some companies in Australia, they have relabeled the promotion management into marketing communication management. So the manager will become marketing communication manager. Okay? Promotion, the essence is communication, therefore it has been labeled into marketing communication. Now, how does the word integrated come from? Well, if we go back to the previous tools that we just discussed briefly, these tools that we have designed to communicate to our customers basically need us to integrate them. So they have to convey a consistent and compelling message or compelling brand or company message for the customers. Okay, so in other words, in terms of persuasive communication, we need to think about the target audience and delivers consistent and compelling or emotive message that supports a brand ideal or a personality, as we discussed before. Okay, that's the reason why we also need to think about the message and media in our communication component. Now let's talk about the communication itself. Communication comes from the word communis, which is basically about commonness. What it means is actually when two parties communicate one to another, they are actually creating commonness between the two. Okay? Let's say if we have A and B involved in the communication, where let's say A sends a message, B receives the message and give it. In this communication process, actually, the more they communicate one to another, A sends the message, B receives the message and gives feedback. They are actually building the commonness between the two in the longer term. So the more overlapping area between the two, the better their commonness will be. Okay, now let's have a look at the components or elements of the communication model. The communication model in here helps us to understand what are the elements that we need to consider when we design communication, our communication strategies. Okay. All right, so we have the sender, which is basically in marketing communication context, it is the marketing communicator or the advertiser or the brand manager or the salesperson or anybody who represents the company to communicate to the customers. And the sender, or the party that sends the message, has objectives. The objectives in communication revolves around three things. First, it is about, at cognitive level, it is about creating the awareness. Second, at affective level, it is actually about creating whether the message is something that the customers likes or not. And third, at behavior level, it is trying to create the action. It is trying to create the action. So at cognitive level, it is about the awareness. At affective level, it is about whether the customers like it or not, which is in leading to the image of the brand or the company. And the last one is behavior, which is basically intended to create the customer's purchase intention. So in short, the objectives revolves around awareness, image, and behavior. Now that objectives will be converted into message, and that is actually taking the encoding process, which is basically the process of putting through putting the thoughts into symbolic form. So they need to convert that thought, that idea, what they want to convey, that involves the objectives, into symbolic form. Symbolic form in here, the symbolic form in here is basically the message. That may be the advertising message, or the public relations message, or the salesperson message, and so on and so forth, for the sender to transmit. And that message is intended for the receiver, okay, which is basically the other party. The marketing communication context, the receiver is the target audience or target consumer. And marketers will only use media to convey the message. And the message that is transmitted to the receiver is going to be decoded by the receiver. That means they reverse the process. So they convert that symbol into meaning, into thought. So they understand. So they'll save that symbol into thought in their mindset. Right? That could be one or two words that they understand about the advertising, the company, or the brand. And after that, they will give feedback to the sender, whether they like the message, whether they understand the message, whether they can accept the image, or whether they are going to buy the product or not. Okay. Now, it is also important to note that along the way of the process, there is also another element that we need to consider, which is basically the noise, the unplanned static or distortion, or anything that can disrupt the communication process. It can happen at any level in here. It could be at the sender level, where they have noise, they have distortion to convey the message, or they have a distortion in terms of translating the objectives into message, or their message is probably a broken message, if you like. For instance, if they hire a brand ambassador that is not in line with their message, that will be a broken message. Okay. And at media level, it can also happen because their competitors also send a message, which is basically trying to get the attention of the receiver as well. Right, so that's basically the communication model. There are several elements in the communication models. Now, in a nutshell, the communication model may look like this, diagram, and in saying that, some other authors suggest a different, slightly different diagram that shows all the elements as well. But essentially, they are the elements in the communication process. Okay. Now, we discussed that in communication, marketing communication, we need to consider the message as well as the media. And in terms of message, some marketers use the rational appeal. They promote the factual information, such as the technology that they promote, or their facts around the brand that revolves around the functional benefit of the brand that they use to appeal the target audience. And some other brands use emotional appeal. So they may use humor, fear, warmth, irritation, and sexual arousal, for instance, to appeal the consumer. You may have seen a number of advertising messages such as mother's hug in the case of, in the case of napkin or baby's napkin, for instance, to show the emotional appeal. Moral appeal may be used by another brand campaign that relies on our sense what is right or wrong. So if you look at charity organizations, for instance, they try to convey that kind of message. You are doing the right thing when you support us because we are giving you good cause, good reasons to donate. All right. Objectives of the promotion includes a number of areas here, like creating awareness, demand, and so on and so forth. I'll leave it to you to go through the details in your prescribed text. Now let's have a look at the tools briefly. Advertising, that's what we mean by advertising. And in today's communication landscape, we also discuss about the essence of communication, whether it has to be through mass media or not, because sometimes because we can also send the link of the advertising campaign to customize our target audience. Okay, developing advertising campaign. There are the steps in terms of developing advertising campaign, starting from the identify and analyze target audience, right through the evaluating the advertising effectiveness. In terms of identifying and analyzing target audience, target audience is the first thing that we need to understand in terms of creating the advertising campaign. And from target audience perspective, we need to understand who they are, basically who they are, what kind of benefits that they're looking for, and how and what is the best way to appeal to this target group. And in terms of objectives, companies would also need to look at the advertising objectives. In doing so, they may refer to the marketing plan. They look at the marketing objectives and convert the marketing objectives into advertising objectives. So if the marketing objectives, for instance, to increase sales by 5% by the end of the year, they would convert that into advertising objectives. What sort of awareness that they need to achieve based on their analysis, their research, or how many more new customers that they need to sign up, and that will affect the advertising task as well. And the other critical element is the budget of advertising. Now let's have a look at the budget. There are several methods of budgeting. Percentage of sales approach, for instance, is one method. This is quite simple, actually. They look at the previous sales achievement or their sales projection to determine the amount of money that they want to spend for advertising campaign. Let's say if a company's sales projection is $100 million based on the previous sales achievement, and the company has the policy of spending 5 cents, that means they can spend $5 million. Simple. And this approach is actually quite popular among medium to large companies because of at least two reasons. It is simple. We only need to know the sales target and the company's position in terms of how much percentage that they want to spend for advertising campaign. And the second reason is that it helps them protecting their own profitability. Okay. Now, the problem with that is there are at least two problems actually with this approach. First one is the company needs to make adjustment because the sales projection that they estimate may not be achievable or may change. The actual may not agree with the sales projection. That's the reason why they need to adjust it. And the other issue with this approach is it is just the reverse way of the purpose of advertising campaign. If we look at advertising campaign further, the purpose of any companies to conduct advertising campaign is to achieve sales target or to increase sales. This approach is basically saying we can advertise if we can sell, not the other way around. Okay. The next one is objective and task approach, which is probably the ideal method for marketers. Okay, with this, we actually take budget, the budget of advertising campaign as part of the strategy or as part of the strategic decision. So in here, we look at the objectives that we want to achieve. We look at the marketing objective, we convert that into advertising objective. And then from that advertising objective, we outline the tasks that we need to deliver. And each task basically means cost for the business. And from there, we can tell how much money we need to spend. Okay. And marketers can also select the competition matching approach or competitive parity approach. So if let's say for argument's sake, if the competitors spend 2 spots on the Big Bang Theory or 5 spots on the Voice TV program, they would match that. Okay? And the other one is arbitrary approach, which is basically budgeting. The budget is determined by the high-level executive in the firm. So the top management makes that decision. Okay. And actually, there's another approach, which is basically affordability approach, which is quite popular among small companies. With the affordability approach, the companies would look at how much revenue that they can make, let's say $5 million this year, based on last year's projection. And they would budget everything that they need to spend, including utilities, wages, the management fee that they need to take, rental fee, electricity, product costs, and so on and so forth. And they look at the remainders. If the remainders say, okay, we have $30,000, then that $30,000 will go to advertising campaign. All right. Now, the other thing is the media plan. I'm not going to detail these, but you can look at the advantages and disadvantages among each single medium, like newspaper, magazines, direct mail, radio, TV, internet, and so on and so forth. Okay. And the other thing that we also need to consider is the advertising message, which is basically part of the creative work of the advertising. That includes the copy, the artwork, illustration, layout, and we normally work with the advertising agency. Now, if you look at these two artwork, that tells us, a different approach of compelling to the audience. And the next thing is to execute the campaign, and it normally involves some other parties as well, such as the advertising agency and some other people as well in the organization. And companies would normally conduct the evaluation of advertising effectiveness, since advertising would cost them quite a lot of money. Normally, they do pre-tests using qualitative research or quantitative research, or they can also conduct consumer panel. And after the campaign, they may also conduct the post-test to measure the effectiveness of the advertising campaign. And in terms of measuring the effectiveness of the advertising campaign, they may ask up to the level of intention to purchase from the audience. And this one he is showing us a number of different tests to measure the effectiveness of advertising. Okay, the other one I'd like to discuss is the product placement. Again, guys, we are not going to discuss every single slide here. You can look at the your e-text for detail of the learning material. And in terms of product placement, some other scholars suggest that it is part of the advertising campaign. Now, why product placement? If you look at advertising messages, for instance, some of the audience have the tendency of avoiding advertising campaign. Now, ask yourself, what would you do when you watch TV and commercial break comes? You may go to the bathroom, or you may go to the pantry making tea or coffee, right? Now, with product placement, where they incorporate the campaign into the TV program or movies, it is hard for the audience to avoid it. Okay, imagine if you look at reality TV show, for instance, and on the judge's desk, you find the Coca-Cola cup, for instance, right? It's hard for us to avoid that. We can't delete that. Okay, and you may also recall James Bond movie, for instance. And one of them shows James Bond. Daniel Craig plays James Bond at a time talking to Eva Green on a train, and they had a conversation. The two of them had the conversation about the James Bond watch at that time. So it is something that the audience cannot delete. Okay. PR is another type of campaign as well, and PR is an interesting one because, as we know, that there's a tendency that the audience may avoid the advertising messages or salesperson from personal selling team. PR helps us reaching this kind of audience because PR messages are basically built by someone who has the reputation, in this instance, the journalist. Right? So that helps us reaching our specific audience. And we normally use news release or press release, basically, or event and sponsorship. So normally PR activities are embedded into event management. All right. And the other thing in terms of PR is basically that will get the PR activity will get stronger value if the news or the announcement or the release that we make to the press is newsworthy. And several things in here in terms of the PR evaluation and also dealing with unfavorable populations. I'm not going to discuss that in here. And sponsorship is another one that marketers can also consider. In regards to sponsorship, it is normally incorporated into what the brand is, what the brand stands for. So a number of techniques in here, including event sponsorship. Okay? And personal selling is another type of integrated marketing communication tool. This is what we mean by personal selling, paid personal communication, or in other words, it is more personalized. And if you contrast that with advertising campaign, personal selling is personalized. So you have the opportunity to talk at one-to-one, face-to-face contacts with the target audience, with the target market, with your potential customer. Okay. Let's contrast that with advertising campaign where the communication is basically to mass audience. Okay, now with that feature, actually personal selling has a great opportunity to get the response from the audience. At least the audience will say no thank you, but we still get the response from the audience. Okay, and in other words, it is quite powerful, but it is also very expensive. Now, in terms of making decision for communication to companies based on the nature of their business, they would need to make decision whether they would focus their dollars on advertising campaign or personal selling campaign. In terms of personal selling campaign, some companies may label them in a different way. Some companies call the team as a sales force, account executive, marketing executive, sales engineer, or any. But they are actually doing sales job in the personal selling management. All right. Now, if we contrast advertising and personal selling as communication tools, companies who have a large number of consumer or target customers, and their price is normally, relatively speaking, quite cheap, would normally use advertising campaign. Think about fast-moving consumer goods products such as biscuit or Tim Tam, for instance, or shampoo, for instance, right? The number of customers in this category would be, large number, like a million, for instance, or maybe more in terms of target prospects. Okay, if we contrast that to another type of business, the other type of business may have a little number of customers, but their transaction is much larger, like business to business type of organizations. Okay, in this instance, they would focus more on the personal selling team. Imagine if you work for Boeing, for instance, you make aircraft and you want to convince Qantas or Ryanair or the other airline companies, instead of spending advertising in 30 seconds that you can tell a lot about your product, you may send your top sales engineer to talk to your customers. All right, so and there are several key features I'd like to highlight from this slide, actually, about the personal selling, right? And we discussed that personal selling basically has the benefit of one-to-one interaction, and which is and with that we can also provide with demonstration for the target market, and it helps us building the closest relationship with the customers. Right, and this one shows the steps in terms of personal selling process, and part of the steps as well. I'm going to skip that. All right, and the next thing that we need to discuss is the sales promotion. All right, and I'll see you in the second part.